Welcome back to another episode of the Stay at Home Mom, and today I want to talk about 5 teaching myths. So, if you haven't seen my other videos, I was a teacher and I worked in the public schools for 10 years as a sub, an aide, and a special ed teacher, and I briefly worked in the private sector for a short time. Okay, let's talk about probably the first and most common myth, or that teachers are underpaid, which I think is like kind of a bunch of baloney. And teacher pay varies from state to state, from district to district, and it varies based on a lot of times standard of living, whether something's considered low or not. But you always hear about teachers saying, oh, they need a summer job because they're just not making their ends meet. Well, sometimes it's because they're trying to pay off that college debt and they chose a profession where they're just not going to make that much and yet got to pay off thousands of student loan debt. So maybe that was just not a wise decision to make in the first place, but whatever. You know what you were getting into when you decided to become a teacher. You knew the pay was going to be low. So my gross pay for working in a rural small district was between starting out at $39,000 and $46,000 for my gross pay. Now, by the time all my taxes were taken out, that was way lower. And so that could be more of a legitimate complaint, that by the time your taxes are taken out. Now, some of that from your pay comes your retirement, because teachers don't pay Social Security. They have a usually different retirement system based on their state. But you have the same other taxes. And then, you got benefits and insurance kind of thrown in there as well. So you have to think about that as your pay. But I worked with teachers that were making over $60,000, and they had been teaching for a very long time, close to retirement age. Nearby districts actually paid their teachers well over $50,000, so I could have gotten a job at a nearby district and made several thousand more dollars, but I made the choice not to because I liked where I was at. I felt like I was listened to, that they tried to do the right thing despite the problems of public education in general. I liked my job. So I'm in Texas, and the median salary is right around the low 50,000 range, and sometimes that includes a lot of first year teachers, because you don't have as many teachers making it to the 30-year or so retirement range. As far as when you're comparing other fields, it's just kind of one of those things. You choose to get a degree in something, you know what it's going to make. You can't expect to be making the amount that a mechanical engineer makes just because you think your job of educating children is more valuable. It's just really not, because you're in a government-funded institution and not in the private sector. So yeah, the pay is going to be different. Teachers are paid to work 187 days a year. That's about, for me, based on my pay, was about $246 a day, or $30 an hour. 30-hour job for 40 hours a week. Now, yes, we know teachers work more than 40 hours a week, but let's just say general. Cost of living was fair to where I lived. Between my husband and I, teacher incomes combined was going to be, probably our net pay was probably closer to $80,000. And we didn't have student loan debt, but we were able to afford a home, and we definitely had money to go out to eat, gas, buy groceries, everything. We didn't really have to worry, except for maybe when I was on maternity leave and wasn't getting my normal monthly paychecks. So, and you have states like New York and California that those teachers are making well over $80,000, and some of them into 6 figures. And yeah, I know standard or the cost of living is different in those states, but it's just one of those things that just drives me crazy when people oh, teachers aren't paid enough. Yeah, I think in most instances teachers make enough, and they can always move and change to make more money. Myth number 2, teachers are having to buy their own supplies. Not every teacher is having to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars every school year to buy their own supplies. Kids do bring school supplies for the most part, and even in lower income districts, kids are still bringing in supplies. Now, kids sometimes don't keep up with their stuff, or they have a limited amount. So teachers are having to purchase things like pencils and papers for their students. And really, that's not necessarily should be costing a teacher thousands of dollars. And I worked in technically it was a low income district, but there was enough of it being like a more middle income district, and it wasn't like extreme poverty. And there really was not much of an issue with students bringing supplies. The only problem was when they would lose it, and you had a lot of parents that just wouldn't bother replacing it when maybe they could have, but they know that the teacher would just give it to them anyway, because sometimes teachers didn't want to have to mess with going to parents and contacting things. But there was plenty of instances where the parents were providing extra supplies to teachers, especially in your more suburban, probably upper income district. And a lot of the things that teachers are talking about when they're buying supplies, that's decorating their classroom. Those are not necessarily essential. Having a cute motivational poster is not essential for teaching children. Now, you want your classroom, of course, to be a warm, welcoming environment. So you need to make a decision in making an investment. Now, what I started doing when I was in college, and probably even when I was in high school, I started collecting things. And my mom even would collect things for me. So I had a lot of things that I didn't have to buy because I saved. There was a teacher when I was working as an aide that was retiring, and I was like, well, what are you going to do with all your decorations? And she was like, well, do you want them? And I was like, yes, I do. And I really didn't end up using the vast majority of it because it just wasn't applicable to what I was teaching. But had I probably been like a kindergarten, first grade teacher, I probably would have used a lot more of that stuff. And I've been able to use some of it while homeschooling, so it worked out really great. And I passed some of it on to other people. So I personally probably spent maybe $100 my first couple years, and then maybe $50 every year after that. And that was sometimes just buying like other things. But for the most part, our school had a supply closet. So if I needed a couple extra dry erase markers or a couple extra pencils, markers, whatever, I could go and can get some of that. And, copy paper, you hear some teachers like they have to go buy their own copy paper because they only are allotted so much. And our district kind of got to that point as well. And I was really good about not having to use as much paper because mostly what I was printing was legal paperwork. And I didn't have my students doing a whole lot of worksheets. So most of my expenses were probably because of laminating, because the laminator would always run out of laminating stuff because teachers would just go through that stuff within the first couple of weeks of school because they need to just laminate everything so it just stays. So I would just go to another store and pay for laminating when I needed to, and it really wasn't that much. It was like 25-50 cents a yard. So that whole supply thing does not apply to every teacher in every district. That is really honestly going to vary. And sometimes teachers don't really need all that cutesy, fun stuff to make their classroom great. And thank goodness for dollar stores these days. I think those have probably saved teachers a ton of money when you can go get a bunch of stuff for just, $10 or $20 ever so often. Myth number 3, teachers do not get respect for their profession. I have no idea where we get this idea from. Like, how do we get an idea that it's not this respected field? I would tell people, oh yeah, I'm a teacher, and they'd be like, oh, that's such a great profession, bless your heart, oh, kids these days, so on and so on. And I would get extra praise because I would say I'm a special ed teacher. But then I would always kind of clarify, well, these are kids with learning disabilities, not kids with severe disabilities that prevent them from functioning like a typical child. I did work with some of those, but that was not kind of my experience. And I don't know if I heard this mostly because of the type of people I hang around. I hung around with mostly middle class, mostly college educated income people. And even as a teacher, like you can get special discounts at places that'll be like for police, firemen, and teachers, special discounts. I can't think of how many times I was able to use my ID to get discounts on special days or just buying certain things. And maybe some of this idea that teachers lack respect comes from the students. And I've definitely heard plenty of stories from teachers that worked in inner city schools that kids were very disrespectful towards teachers, but generally they were like that towards any type of authority figure. And that kind of just goes playing into that particular culture, and they're probably not going to show respect towards any kind of adult, because that's what their other peers do, and not necessarily maybe how they were raised, but maybe. I've ever heard plenty of stories from teachers I know that worked in inner city schools, but I worked in suburban rural type schools, and respect from students was hardly ever a problem. I mean, it would happen on occasion, because I think every child at some point is going to be disrespectful towards an adult because they don't agree, they want to assert their autonomy and their individuality. And I worked in a daycare when I was a teenager, and I think I saw way more disrespect from like 4 and 5-year-olds and 3-year-olds than probably I did from school age children. So it's not a respected field. Nah, it's a pretty respected profession. Okay, how about this myth? About teachers being trained professionals. So just because you have a degree and you've taken and passed some tests does not mean you are just like the go-to person in this particular field, that you have all the knowledge, the answers, and that you are just some authority. That's total nonsense and baloney. Okay, I passed tests that made me certified to teach any subject up to 8th grade, but you probably would not want me teaching your child 8th grade science, because I'm going to have to sit there and reteach and relearn that information myself, which is what I will do as a homeschooling mom. I'm going to relearn the information. But I don't need to know everything, and plenty of teachers will watch Khan Academy before they start teaching that subject because they just don't know, because they haven't used that information since school themselves. So I also worked with alternatively certified teachers, some good ones and some bad ones. And for example, like one of the bad ones I worked with, I was in college. I had actually passed both my certification tests while I was in college. And this teacher that was alternatively certified had only passed one and had failed the other one. So she actually had to retake it. And we would actually talk about the test. And she didn't even know how to write lesson plans. She had been in social work, so she had experience working in special education, but not really experience teaching. So I left a bad taste in my mouth for alternatively certified teachers, but I had met some really good ones that were good at what they could do. And I think about all the bad teachers I had in school. I just think about this, the coaches that were sometimes pretty terrible at their teaching. Not all of them, but most of them were. And my government coach, I just remember him sitting on the desk and him slinging his lanyard around, hitting the table side to side, and just talking about really random stuff and trying to teach us. But I don't think I learned a single thing. A lot of teachers, I didn't learn anything, because we would just sit there and they would go over notes of something, and then you would ask a question and they just really couldn't give you a good answer. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're just full of it. They don't know. Not all of them, but a lot are. They just don't know always what they're doing. And especially a lot of first-year teachers are just totally winging it, because your idea of college is not the real world. And bless any little kid's heart that gets a first-year teacher that a lot of times is just winging it, and your kids are almost sometimes like little guinea pigs. But what makes usually for a good teacher is one that cares, is passionate, and experienced. I wasn't really good maybe my first 2 years, but by my 3rd and my 4th year, I really was getting going. And I think by my 5th and 6th year teaching, I was a pretty good teacher. I knew what I was doing at that point, because I had been working in the field long enough, and I was kind of trained and had the knowledge to know how to do my job effectively and efficiently. And I think that can be like that in any profession. So just because someone has, I think, a piece of paper does not mean they are the be-all, end-all on the authority, and that can really be for anything. I think anyone is very capable of learning the information themselves if they are so interested. There's just so much out there for them to know. So you do not need a degree in science in order to necessarily learn about whatever topic that's available. You can just read it and learn that information for yourself. Myth number 5, teachers are overworked. So teachers are contracted to work 8 hours a day. Their lunch is usually not included in that time, so they're maybe there for 8.5 hours. And then the occasional twice a year, they're required to do like a parent-teacher conference, or there's like a grade level performance or some kind of school event that they have to usually do so many a year. Sometimes we can't help working those extra hours because like sometimes your conferences are spent with like extra meetings. Like you had these like PLT, PLC meetings, you had IEP meetings, and that's when you really needed to do your teacher planning, your paperwork, because teachers have a lot of really dumb paperwork they have to do, but whatever. But for a lot of teachers, especially your veterans, some of them, like, they're out that door at, like, that cutoff. They might linger for 15 minutes to make it look like they're kind of doing stuff, but they are, like, out the door. And you have some teachers that are, like, barely making it in the door when they are supposed to be there. And they just, like, they know what they're doing. Like, they don't have to spend hours like a new teacher maybe would, because they've been doing this for years. They've kind of got it down to where they just know what they're doing, and maybe they're just checking around on the computer. I think there's even plenty of times that there were days that, especially towards like Christmas break, testing weeks, and like the last week or two of school, like there was just nothing to do. It was like busy work for the kids. I was doing my paperwork for the year, and like I would just spend time like on the computer, like just watching YouTube videos and just, I don't know, jacking around. Like I was kind of wasting time because there wasn't anything to do. But that definitely wasn't the norm. It's definitely pretty frowned upon for teachers to leave early or to leave on time, even when they're allowed to be out that door by 3:45, 4 o'clock. That's just frowned upon. And that can kind of put you like in hot water. Even though they can't fire you for it, they can kind of put you in hot water. Except for Fridays. Like that's the only time it's socially acceptable for a teacher to like be out that door as soon as the kids are gone. So when I first started teaching, I was probably working 60 hours a week or more because I was just like new at this and I was just trying to figure everything out. And then it slowly just became less, especially once I started having children. I probably really averaged a 50-hour work week, and that 50 hours included the 2 or 3 I might work on the weekend to like get all my lesson plans, and that I wasn't able to get in on Friday, or I wasn't gonna have time to do it Monday morning or something. So those are the 5 common myths I think regarding teaching, and I imagine this video has ruffled some feathers and people saying, well, you Miss Receptor, that's not fair, and you've got your personal experience, and your personal experience is definitely your own and yours to own. Maybe you were a teacher and you think, oh, what are some other myths about teaching that you ran into as well? Or maybe just someone that's on the outside and you saw things about teaching because your kid was in school, or your own experience with working in schools and things like that. Any kind of experience that you got, leave me a comment and don't forget to subscribe.